Section number 6 is entitled the Square Roots of Sine Numbers. We really should say that's the square root of non-negative numbers. There are 3 types of numbers: negative, 0, and plus, positive numbers. If you rule out negative, then you're non-negative. You're not positive if you're not negative, because you might also be 0. Okay. Having said that, let's look at this notation here. This is read the square root of, in this case, 16. It was 25 underneath the square root sign. It'll be the square root of whatever is under the square root symbol. Now, the square root symbol is shorthand for this. A little 2 up there. What this is asking is, what positive number, when you multiply it by itself 2 times, gives you 16? Well, I ask you, they say, I don't know, and they give up. There's no need to give up. Multiply a number by itself 2 times. Say 1 times 1. Well, that's not 16. Let's try 2 times 2. That's still below 16. 3 times 3 is 9. We're getting closer to 16. Oh, 4 times 4 is 16. So the square root of 16, that is, what times itself 2 times, gives you 16? 4. The square root of 25. Why, that's 5, because it turns out that 5 times 5 is 25. So the square root of 25 is 5. Now, of course, I agree that negative 5 times negative 5 is also 25. So, if I just ask you, what times itself 2 times gives you 25? You should say 5 and minus 5. If I ask you, what times itself 2 times gives you 25? You should say that number that you're squaring. The number that you're squaring can be plus or minus 5. Fair enough. But when it comes to square roots, you're not allowed to give a negative answer. That's how, decades, centuries ago, square root was defined. You do not take the square root of a number and ever get negative. It's by definition. There's nothing to understand there. But you have to know the definition. The square root of a number is never negative. That's true for every even root. The square root of a number is never negative. Does that mean it's always positive? No. Does not mean it's always positive. Because of the square root of 0. What times itself 2 times gives you 0? Put only one number in the box, one distinct number. You get 0? The only answer is 0. The square root of 0 is 0. 0 is not positive. So I will not say the square root of a number is always positive. I will not say that. Why? It's not true. But I will say it's never negative. The only time you get 0 is when you take the square root of 0. I talked about even roots. Somebody gives you this problem. The 4th root is 16. Now you must put the 4 there. If there's no number, it's understood to be 2. This is asking what times itself, what positive number, or 0. When you multiply it by itself 4 times, gives you 16. Well, I know 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 is 1, so let's try 2. 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 times 2 is 4. Oh my, 16. Done. The answer is 2. Of course, negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. Well, negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. And negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. And 4 times 4 is 16. But we're not supposed to get negative. Not supposed to get negative when we take even roots. And square roots is always even. What do I mean by even? The number there is understood to be the number 2. And 2 is even. So, if somebody asks you, what is the square root of negative 9? Well, forget the 9 for a moment. Let's just concentrate on the negative. There's 3 possible answers. Either it'll be a negative number, it'll be the number 0, or it'll be a positive number. Let's talk about a negative. Whatever negative number you put, remember, the square root of 25 is equal to 5. Because when I multiply this number by itself, I get 25. If I take any negative number, negative 1, negative 3, negative 10, and I multiply it by itself, I'm going to get a positive number, which will never ever equal negative 9. So you can't be negative. So maybe a 0. Is the square root of negative 9 0? Well, 0 times 0, of course, is 0. That's not negative 9. So the square root of a negative 9 can't be 0. Can it be a positive answer? Like positive 5, positive 9. Well, forget about the number for a moment. If you multiply the 2 positive numbers, you'll get a positive, which will never be negative 9, regardless of what positive number you put in here. Whether you put positive 7s or positive 8s, the answer will be positive. It won't be negative. It couldn't be negative 9. So the square root of negative 9 couldn't even be a positive answer. In fact, we never really took into account the 9. We took into account the number underneath the square root sign was negative. So, what is the square root of negative 9? One would say, until you talk about imaginary numbers, one would say it is undefined. At some point, I'll talk about something called imaginary numbers, and you will get an answer. In fact, the square root of any negative number is undefined. Because again, the square root of a negative number, it can't be a positive number, because when I square that positive number, I'll get a positive number. I won't get negative. It can't be the number 0. Remember up here at top left, the square root of 25 is 5 for 2 reasons. One, 5 is not negative. And when I multiply 5 by itself, I get 25. When I multiply 0 by itself, I don't get a negative number. I get 0. Can the square root of a negative number equal a negative number? Well, when you square a negative number, when you multiply a negative number by itself, you don't get a negative number. The square root of a negative number is always undefined. I can just have given you that. I said, square root of negative numbers is never defined. And you're going to have to remember that. But here, I'm hoping you can become tough and say, well, you know what? It's either a positive number or a negative number or a 0. It can't be positive because the positive squared is positive. It can't be 0 because 0 squared is 0. It can't be a negative number because when I square it, I get a positive number. I'm never getting a negative number. Okay, so it can't exist. You cannot take the square root of a negative number. Okay, so now we know how much this is. We talked about it a few times already. It's that number. Whenever you see this, you should think 5. That's 5. Well, that's negative 5 then. It's negative 5. This is negative 5. There's the negative sign. As long as right there I put something that equals 5, my equal sign will be right. Well, I feel like putting the square root of 25. That's just another way of writing 5. Negative 5. Negative 5. Square root of 25 is 5. How much is this going to be? Well, it's negative because of that symbol. And the square root of 36 is 6 because 6 times 6, 36. But you said you could never take the square root of a number and get negative. I didn't. The square root of 36 is 6. I never said it's negative. But somebody puts a minus sign in front of 6. When I see this, I see 6. Somebody puts a minus sign in front of 6, I'm not going to be silly and say that negative 6 equals 6. Negative 6 equals negative 6. If you have a fraction and it's reduced, even if it's not reduced, it's the square root of the top or the square root of the bottom. The square root of 4 is 2, the square root of 9 is 3. Somebody asks you, what is the square root of 25 over 49? You should think, whether you write what I'm writing right now or not, you should think the square root of 25 is that number divided by the square root of 49 is that number. So you may or may not want to write that. But you have to think it in your head. What's the square root of 25? What's the square root of 49? Now this is very different than the square root of 25 over 49. You're just taking the square root of 25, which is 5. And 49 is 49. 49 is not 7. The square root of 49 is 7, but no, 49 is not 7. So let's draw on this one up here. Somebody asks you what the square root of 25 over 49 is. You should think the square root of 25 over the square root of 49. If somebody gives you this same number, and that whole thing is 5 over 7, and they put a minus sign in front of it, why, you should get 5 over 7 with a minus sign in front of it. Somebody now asks you, what is the square root of negative 25 over 49? You should respond, it's undefined. You cannot take the square root of a negative number. Now, let's go and talk about what I was referring to when I say you should reduce what's underneath the square root sign. For example, suppose you have 49, the square root of 98 over 50. The square root of 98 over 50. Now, yes, this does equal to the square root of 98 divided by the square root of 50. Absolutely. But I don't know the square root of 98, and I don't know the square root of 50. But I can reduce reduce what's underneath the radical sign, namely reduce that. They're both even numbers. 2 goes into 98 49 times, and 2 goes into 50 25 times. I'm just reducing them, top and bottom. But now this is our old problem. The square root of 49 I know, and the square root of 25 I know. It's 7 over 5. Somebody gives you, say, the square root of 24 over 54. Well, you don't know the square root of 24. 4 times 4 is less than 24. And 5 times 5 is more than 24. You don't know the square root of 24. 7 times 7 is 49, which is less than 54. And 8 times 8 is more than 54. Don't know the square root of 54. But you can reduce these. 6 goes into the top number 4 times. 6 goes into the bottom number 9 times. This is the square root of 4 over 9. I know the square root of 4, and I know the square root of 9. Here's my answer, 2 over 3. Sometimes you should reduce it. Other times you can reduce it, but you don't have to. For example, I don't know, if you have 81 over 9, or 81 over 9, fine. Here's the square root of 81. Square root of 81 is 9. The square root of 9 is 3. And 9 divided by 3 is 3. You could have said 81 divided by 9 is 9. This is 9. 9 goes in here 1 time. 9 goes into the top 9 times. 9 over 1 is 9. And the square root of 9 is 3. Here, you didn't have to reduce. You didn't have to reduce. Why? Because I knew the square root of 81, and I knew the square root of 9. But in this problem over here, to the left, I didn't know the square root of 98, and I didn't know the square root of 50. I didn't know what the square root of 98 was. I did not know what the square root of 50 was. But when I reduced 98 over 50, I got the division of two numbers that I knew the square root of. I knew the square root of 49, and I knew the square root of 5. So sometimes you reduce. When you don't know the square roots, reduce. Hopefully after you reduce, you'll know the square roots. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, and to be honest, this puzzles me, that students would make this mistake. Apparently, some of you don't listen to your own answers. I would bet my life on it. If I asked you to write on a piece of paper the number 4, I asked you to write the number 4, nobody would write that. Nobody. If I asked you on a piece of paper to write the number 3, nobody would write this. Nobody. However, if I ask you, for example, what's the square root of 16, you'll say 4. But then, you don't write down 4. That's not 4. That's 4. If you insist, that's 4. That's not 4. That's not 4. The square root of 16 does not equal that number. Listen to what you're saying. If you say the square root of 16 is 4, why are you trying to commit suicide and write down something else? Like the square root of 4. whether you're right or wrong, somebody asks you what 78 plus 12 is, and for whatever reason you think it's 141. You think 141. What are the odds that if you write down another number that you'll be right? I mean, you were wrong with 141, fair enough. But if you write down a different number, you're going to be wrong. If you figure out that 78 plus 12 is 90, and you write down a different number, like 361, you're going to be wrong. If you think that the answer to that question, whatever it is 11, write down 11. Don't write down the square root of 11. Whatever you think it is, write it down. The odds are that if you write down a different number, that you are right, it's 0. It's not going to happen. You're not going to write down a random number and be right. And back to this problem here. Let me do it on top. If you think the square root of 16 is the square root of 4, fair enough, think that. But then you better write down what the square root of 4 is. Because you're not done yet. And I suspect you're going to call it this, since the square root of 4 is 2, you may write down the square root of 2. No. The square root of 16 is 4. If you think the answer is 4, put it down. Don't put down a different number. If you think the square root of 4 is 2, don't write down anything but 2. It's suicidal to write down something else. You all know how to write down 4. And that's not how you write down 4. This is not how you write the number 3. The square root of 9 equals 3. I hear you say that. I'll hear students in our office say the square root of 9 is 3. But then they'll write a number that isn't 3. Square root of 9 does not equal 3. The only square root number that the square root of 9 equals is the square root of 9. The square root of 4 is equal to the square root of 4. Somebody said the square root of 213 is equal to the square root of x. What should x be? You should say, x should be 213. The square root of 213 equals the square root of 213. If you think the answer is 213, do not put down the square root of 213, because they're not equal. The only time you'll be right is if instead of 1, you write the square root of 1. The square root of 1 is 1. I would say you're not finished if you wrote your final answer as square root of 1. But yes, 1 equals the square root of 1, and 0 is the square root of 0. Other than that, the square root of a number does not equal that number. Excuse me, a number does not equal the square root of that number. If you think the answer is 11, don't write square root of 11. And you want to pass your exam. You don't want to commit suicide on it. On that note, that finishes the section entitled Square Roots of Finite.